they ended up, a bunch of them ended up getting court-martialed. They were a sadistic bunch. As an officer, you know, I've been told to convene a court-martial and did so on a staff sergeant, and on another, as an investigating officer on a diploma ring in recruiting, a bunch of recruiters making diplomas. I can tell you that unlawful command influence, we all went through this motion because, as an investigator, did the colonel give you a wink and a nod on the outcome was already predetermined kind of thing? So I'm blown away that you tell me that the commandant said this to those officers, and I think it'd be a great postscript if you could write something on the fate of the officers that went against the grain, because I'll tell you right now, your career would be shot even today.
That one wouldn't be on base to be sold either, probably. Huh?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I don't think the
That's right.
bookstore would carry that one.
Unless they all did really well.
I think one of the reasons was that this particular commandant was not held in high esteem. He was not well regarded. He was, you know, came up staff all the way.
Was that General Pate?
Randolph McCall Pate, yeah.
And in the book, he died shortly after that.
He did, very shortly after.
He died shortly after this.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it has to do with anything with Ribbon Creek, but I think it has to do with society today. A lot of the stuff, and why they don't want your book in the bookstore, at the museum and stuff, just for the problem that we had here in Beaufort, putting our Purple Heart Monument that we just did a couple of years ago on Parris Island. The general said that he wanted it hidden out at the mess hall, out at weapons, because he was so afraid of families seeing it, that they would think that their kids might get a Purple Heart. And I thought, I would think every kid going into the Corps today, or into the Army, especially in infantry and things like that, can almost expect to get a Purple Heart. And but he actually wanted it hidden. And we were ready to just forget the whole thing. We already had the monument made, try to find another place. And the new general came in and said, oh no, that goes right by the parade deck. And I've noticed on numerous graduations, lots of pictures of people taking with their kids right beside the thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's a new way of looking at things, and it's not everybody, but that they try and hide more from their kids, I think, than I know, not kids, but than they should. And I think that this is something that scares them for some reason, and I don't get exactly why. I think it's just the way society looks at things now.
Well, we're going to get into that in just a little bit, but let's. One of the things that we brought up when we talked about this, when Jay and I talked about this on Wednesday, one of the things that we brought up about the whole idea of why these things are hidden is simply that we all, and it came up yesterday in my conversation with a Marine officer, we were talking about something else, and I said, you know, we need to examine our failures as well as our successes. We cannot find solutions to our problems unless we examine we can't find the solutions unless we take apart and analyze the problem.
Absolutely.
And that's something that we're beginning to move closer towards in the military, but there is this whole sense of people aren't going to want to enlist in this day and age. Young college graduates aren't going to want to come into the military in this day and age when it is so competitive out there. They're not going to want to come in if the whole idea is, I'm going to go get a Purple Heart or I'm going to die. You know, they want to know, how are you going to keep my child alive? Right? I'm willing to go fight. And Rich, your story that you're writing for this particular workshop touches on this, the difference in the idea of a World War II veteran who, the day after December 7th, 1941, everybody's beating down the door to get to the recruiter's office and enlist and get over there and kick some Japanese butt, make up for this thing, right? But September 11th happens, and we get a complete opposite reaction. Right? September 11th happens and we get a complete opposite reaction. Enlistees are dropping out of their contracts. Parents are calling up and saying, my child's not going. Nobody's wanting to enlist. But now a few years later, 8 years later, there's no problem filling the ranks. it's like all of the really truly patriotic people have come out of the woodwork, right? No?
They
No.
need jobs.
No, I am.
Absolutely. They need jobs now.
Economic recession. So then you start to wonder, how politically connected is the recession to the military? You know, they always say that if you want to end a recession, you start a war. And then you have to say how politically connected is the recession. You could say, you could really develop a conspiracy theory from that one. The longer we stay in the recession, the longer we'll be able to fill the ranks, which brings up the idea of controversial topics, which is one of the things I wanted to bring up, the brutality. The idea of brutality in this episode. In my mind, having been a two-tour drill instructor, I know that we go to great lengths to get these recruits to train, that one of our biggest problems is failure to train. I had one platoon at one point in my career as a senior drill instructor that I graduated with only 26 Marines because I had so many health problems, so many attitude problems, so many failures to train. I think it was close to Christmas platoon, one of those. And so, you know, a drill instructor's hands are tied as far as what can I do within reason and within the law with the standard operating procedures. What can I do to get these recruits motivated? And I in my mind, I don't believe for a minute that McEwen took those recruits into that swamp or into that Ribbon Creek as a means of being brutal or cruel or just plain mean. I think he truly thought that what he was doing was a motivator. It was going to show them how to operate as a team.
Yeah, that's how you learn.
And yet there's that spin that always gets put on, the political spin. The idea that if you look at it from one perspective, it's brutality. If you look at it from another perspective, it's this guy was doing the best he could to train these Marines. Go ahead, Rich, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, if I'm reading from your book, Jay, it seemed as if the standard operating procedures definitely for Parris Island, but probably for all training commands and wrinkle was an outgrowth of this incident. Is that correct?
It was, I didn't hear the last of what you said.
Standing operating procedures that came out of this and the fact-finding that went on after this and how we're going to tailor recruitment, because I don't think there was a whole lot of structure before.
Right.
No, the drill instructor's SOP came after Ribbon Creek. Exactly. It was a result of Ribbon Creek. That SOP was produced following this incident. That's when it, that's what one of the first things you learn at DI school. Although they won't teach your book at DI school, which is another point that we discussed, and I said to Jay, you know, in my opinion, if every drill instructor should be required to read this book. Every drill instructor should be in DI school required to read this book.
So you don't speak at DI school?
My experience there, let me back up just a quick
Yes, sir.
comment on what you said before. General Wallace Greene, who later became commandant, was sent down as he was a brigadier general at the time to Parris Island right after this happened by the commandant to take over there. They changed the structure around. And Greene, I have some letters that Greene wrote to a colleague of mine who's an historian, a fellow named Gene Alvarez. Greene says that there were 10, I think I mentioned this, 10 recruits he found in sick bay with broken noses, broken by the fists of drill instructors when he got here, down here. Now this is after Ribbon Creek, 6 months after when he gets down here. When I went through, a lot of the brutality, what they called thumping, was still around. It wasn't like it used to be, I think, but I saw a guy get down, we were in Quonset huts, right down on the concrete with the drill instructor's hands around his neck, choking him. I thought I was going to kill him. And I got nailed right in the solar plexus once because I put on a cartridge belt going to church when I wasn't supposed to. You know, but those were relatively minor incidents. Of course, the profanity and racism and sexism and all of that were flagrant at that time. I think even the profanity has been limited now.
Definitely.
I don't think they're used now.
It's still there, but it's not like it